Hey guys, and welcome back to the Matthew 514 podcast. So it's been a long time since I filmed, been really crazy here at college, and now I'm in my last 2 weeks of the semester when this comes out because I'm filming it on a Saturday. It should come out this next Monday. I literally have 2 weeks left of school, which is so sad because I absolutely love it here, and it is such a gift and a blessing to be here. Really sad, but I am excited to go back home. And so in honor of like 2 weeks left, I thought that I would talk to you guys about my story of how I came to Ole Miss because it is such a testimony of God and His goodness, and just His faithfulness and grace and love, over our lives. And I got to experience it on such a personal note. Before we dive into that, do a little catch up with you guys. I've been super busy. I definitely been putting the podcast on the back burner just because school has been my priority. As I mentioned before, I'm a special education major, so I've had my education classes, which has been fun. The past 4 weekends have been absolutely insane. Weekend before this was the first weekend that I actually got to rest, and I've just been having like a lazy day all day. And so if that is an encouragement to anybody, this is a reminder to you that we still need to prioritize Sabbath and resting and taking care of ourselves, and making sure that we are getting filled up and we're not just constantly pouring ourselves out. So today's looked like sleeping in and reading my Bible and reading my books, but also just watching movies and eating snacks as well, because both are good and fun. So just been resting today because last weekend my sister came in town and we got to go to a Morgan Wallen concert, and I got to show her all around Oxford. She's been before, but not since I came to school here, so that was super fun. And then weekend before that, I went on a little girls trip with Sophie and Sarah Beth. If you guys haven't watched the podcast with them about our friendship and everything, then I definitely suggest you guys go listen to that because I think there's a lot of truth in that and a lot of goodness that you can take away. But I was out of town with them. They took me to like their hometowns, and that was just such a fun weekend. Girls' weekend, loved it. The weekend before that, I was back home for Easter, and that was my first time getting to go back home this whole semester, so it was super duper fun. And then weekend before that, I was out of town for Sarah Beth's birthday weekend. So it's just been crazy and busy, and it nonstop. And so haven't really had time for the podcast. Well, I guess I could make time, but it's been on the back burner. But now we're gonna make it a priority again. So that's kind of what I've just been, doing and what's been happening. And I also I feel like one thing too that God has just been really growing in me in this season of my life is just my walk with Him, and just learning to have my eyes set on Him and focused on Him just in different unique ways, and learning that my relationship with Him is not about checking the box, but it's simply about accepting who He is. And while that's a basic truth that we need to know, it's something that as life gets busy and crazy, it's easy to forget. And so I want to remind you guys that your walk with Jesus is not about checking the box. It's not about religion or legalism. It's about a relationship with Him. It's about knowing His heart and allowing Him to know yours, even if that doesn't always look perfect, and even if you don't always do all the things that you want to do. Like, He loves you just the way that you are. Whether your time with Him is 30 minutes or it's 1 minute. Obviously, we should seek for 30 minutes, but we're only human. We're going to drop the ball. We're going to make mistakes. That's why He came for us and He died for us. And so His love for you is crazy good. And I just want to remind you guys that, your walk with Him is not about checking the box. It's simply about acceptance. So that's just kind of what He's been showing me, what I've been doing lately. And then I get to go back home in 2 weeks, and super excited for this summer. I'm actually still going to be doing some college classes online and working. So it's going to be a busy summer, but it's going to be a fun summer back home. So yeah, that's what's been going on. But now I want to dive into my story about how I came to Ole Miss. I thought, in honor of talking about Ole Miss, wear some Ole Miss merch. I typically wear a lot of Ole Miss merch because, well, I go here. But, I wasn't wearing any. So I threw this t-shirt on, and we're going to dive into this, and we're going to talk about it. So let's get into it. Before I start sharing everything, I do want to start out by saying that, I think there's so many different things in this story to take away. And I also just want to point out, all of this goodness of God has nothing to do with me. It is literally all because of Him. And I wouldn't be here at Ole Miss if it weren't for Him. And I wouldn't have the mindsets I have if it weren't for Him. And so I don't want you guys, because I think it's so easy to look at testimonies and be like, oh, well, they've got blank, 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 blank. I can never have that. And I just want you guys to realize and to see, this has nothing to do with me, and it has everything to do with God. All glory and honor to Him forever and ever. And so just wanted to get that out there. Boasting about who he is and about what he's done in my life, not about me, because it has nothing to do with me. And then I hope that there's so many different things that you guys can take away from this, because I think that, it has been a testimony of God's goodness, and there's a lot that can be learned from this. So let's get into it. So my family has always been such a big road trip family. And we have been talking about, where Maddie and I was in high school at the time, and it was my junior year. And so we've been talking about where Maddie and I, because I'm a twin, if you didn't know that, where we were going to go to school. And we always had loved road trips, and we always loved to the South. I'm from Virginia, and technically that's considered the South, but in my opinion, it's not the South anymore. And so we'd always, loved to the South, loved going on road trips. So my mom was like, well, why don't we just do a road trip through a lot of the major SEC schools in the South and see if any of you guys like those? And I don't even know where the desire, honestly, for an SEC school, came to be. We just thought, like, that'd be fun, a big school, university, get a good education, fun experiences. And like, my parents are amazing, and they've always wanted like nothing but the best for my sister and I. And they've always, wanted to give us amazing opportunities. And so I think like it was just like a dream of my mom's for us to be able to go to a big college and have that experience. So, we were planning the road trip, and there was talk about going to Ole Miss, but it wasn't on the list. They were like for sure ones that we were going to look at. And I remember I come back home from church with a friend, and my mom, had a little, trip itinerary out. And I was like, can we go to Ole Miss? Like, I'd heard people talk about it before, and this is so bad of me. I thought Ole Miss was in Alabama. That's kind of embarrassing. But I didn't realize it stood for the University of Mississippi. I just knew it was Ole Miss, and for some reason I thought it was in Alabama. For whatever odd reason. I don't know. And I was like, I want to go there. And so mom was like, okay, like it's a little out of the way, wasn't planning on it, but we'll add it. And I just remember I was standing, my friend was sitting at the table, my mom was sitting in the kitchen, and I was standing in between the table and the kitchen, and I just blurted out loud, I don't know where it came from, but I was like, well, what if I went to Ole Miss and I became a teacher, and I got my education degree? And I just said that, and I just thought like the little dream sounded like fun or whatever. And lo and behold, here we are now. But that was just like a little God moment. So we went on the road trip, and we got to Ole Miss, and I just fell in love with the campus here. Like, it was just beautiful. We have the Grove, which I am literally, like, the Grove is, like, right there for me where my dorm is. And so, love the Grove. And then we've got the Square, which is, like, our downtown area. And I just thought everything was so cute. It was so small town, and I just remember touring it and just looking at the, things and being like, I would love to go here. And after each school we weighed the pros and the cons, and literally everything about Ole Miss was a pro. The only con was it was 13 hours away. And I'd always been such a homebody and super close with my family, really close with my parents. So I was like, I could never do that. Like, I just couldn't, I love it. It's dream school. It'd be perfect. Like, can they just have one in Virginia? Like, can there just be, it can be closer. Like, there's all these other schools that we're looking at. Some of them are 6 hours away, 8 hours away. Like, why is this one the farthest away that we're looking at, 13 hours away? And so definitely a little bit of a bummer with that. But, we just kept on, looking through the different schools or whatever. And at the time, I actually was thinking that I was going to go into ministry. I didn't think that I was even going to go to a big university. And that, like, in the span of planning the trip to going on the trip, I was like, I might just go to, go to ministry. And my mom was like, no, like, I don't think that's what you're called to do. I think, like, your ministry is going to be in a job. But obviously I didn't know yet. And toured Ole Miss, loved it, went on the road trip. It was great. Got back home, and I just thought, you know what? Like, I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going to go. Don't know what I'm going to do. Don't know what I'm going to study. So then that was summer, going into my senior year. Then my senior year started, and I got back into, I was a buddy. I was like a part of the buddy program, and that's where you go into the special ed classrooms, and you just hang out with the kids, and you go to classes with them, or you just, help them in their class. And that's where, like, I fell in love with special education, and I've been doing that for, senior year is my third year doing it. And once I was back in the classroom doing it again, I was like, oh yeah, like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. Like, I want to be a special ed teacher, because it is my heart, and it's so beautiful, and I love it. So at that point, knew I wanted to be a special ed teacher, but I had no idea where I wanted to go to school. And I think Ole Miss, it was like an idea, and I would have liked to do it. I was definitely still wobbling around with, it's a little too far. So I was a field hockey player, field hockey season, was rolling around. I decided that I was going to graduate high school a semester early. So I was finishing up, I was in that was my last semester of high school, field hockey season. And then I met the guy that ended up being my ex now. And I started dating him. And before I knew it, I was in that relationship and it became very unhealthy and very toxic. But I ended up staying in it because I was young and I was learning and I thought that, that's what I was supposed to be in. And so I remember all throughout the relationship though, anytime things just were not working out, I would just always think if I didn't work out with this guy, I would want to go to Ole Miss. I loved it there. I would want to go there. And so that was just always kind of in the back of my mind. But then me and this guy, we started getting pretty serious and, I ended up, graduating high school the semester early. And then since I didn't know where I was going yet, I just applied for community college at home and I started taking classes at home and just figured that I would do really well at that and then eventually transferred to university. And I just decided, you know what, I'll just stay here in Virginia and be with this guy and just stay here. Or stay there. Well, I'm not there right now. So there, not here. But so I thought I would just stay there. And so, that relationship was bad and I just started, losing sight of who I was. I pushed out, my godly community because they saw that the relationship wasn't good. And they, kind of started putting some pressure on me Carter, we care about you. Is everything okay? And I pushed them out and I started losing sight of myself and, knowing I wasn't on the right track, I started pushing God out and I never fully pushed him out, but I would be more surface level with things. And then I ended up, falling into sexual sin. And then just went down this spiral, of pushing out all these good things and just filling my life with negative things that were not good. And so this relationship had gotten really serious, stuck in sin, not around good community. And at this point, a couple months had gone by and I was in my third semester of college. I condensed my college a lot. So third semester of college, summertime. So been a year now since that road trip that I took for the different schools or whatever. Well, around a year. And I was about to make a life decision that was going to be really big, and my parents were not for it. They were not agreeing with it, and it was definitely causing arguments. And I remember I was in, a really bad argument with my mom about it. We were just disagreeing over it. Because she saw right through everything and she saw that I wasn't being true to myself. I wasn't, walking out my faith like I'm called to. This relationship was not one that I should be in. And she saw that I was just lying to myself and lying to everybody else around me. And she loved me too much to, allow me to stay stuck in that. And I just remember, we were in this argument. I was about to go to work and my heart just changed. And I just remember just a full 180. I was going this one direction and then my heart totally changed and just 180. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I don't know why I'm making this decision. And I was like, and if I'm being honest, every time, things are not working out with this guy, and typically just in the back of my mind, I just think about going to Ole Miss. I want to go there. And my mom just looked at me and she was like, Carter, then go. We will allow you to go. Go. Nothing's stopping you. And it just dawned on me, okay, let me go. And my eyes were open to the fact that this relationship was really unhealthy that I was in and not good. So then decided to stay with the guy, but I decided to apply to Ole Miss. And then 10 days later, I got in. And then a couple days after that, I broke up with him. And then started the journey and the process of healing before I came here. And so before I keep going on with the story, I just want to point out a couple different things. First off is my story reminds me so much of Jonah. Jonah was in the belly of the whale or the fish. It was a fish or a whale. It was something like that. And he was just stuck in this place of darkness. And God was the one who pulled him out of it. And I'm not going to go through and read all of Jonah, but if you guys want to, definitely read Jonah chapter 2, because it's just all about, God pulling him out of the darkness. And I do want to read one part of it, just because this is exactly what God did for me. And this is where I really want to emphasize, it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with God. But in Jonah 2:5, it says, I sank beneath the waves and the waters closed over me. Seaweed wrapped itself around my head. I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates locked shut forever. But you, O Lord my God, snatched me from the jaws of death. As my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Those who worship false gods turn their backs on all God's mercies, but I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. And that's exactly what God did for me. I was walking down a path of death, not life. I was denying, my faith and what was, right and good and pure. And I was choosing sin over God. I was choosing a boy over God. I was choosing my way over God's way. And he totally changed my heart, allowed it to be a 180, pulled me out of that. And he showed me, no, Carter, I want you to choose me over a guy. I want you to choose me over your plans. I want you to choose me over sin. And so he pulled me out. And I think it also goes so well with Psalms 42, which says, he lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. And so God just pulled me out of it, set me free, and allowed me to start running after what he had for me again. And also, like I said, I don't want to take credit for it. And in Ephesians 2:8-10, it says, God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done, so none of us can boast about it, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. And so, him saving me and allowing that to be a 180 had nothing to do with me, and it had everything to do with him. And it was because he had a great plan for me, and plans to prosper me and not to harm me, and plans to give me hope in the future. And friends, I want to remind you that that is the same for you, that it is not God's plan for you to stay stuck in a path of death. It is not God's plan for you to stay in a path stuck, with sin. It is not his plan for you to put other things above him, for you to be in toxic, unhealthy relationships, for you to be stuck in sexual sin, for you to be broken, to be depressed, to be hurt and down. It is not his plan for you to be stuck with, using drugs or alcohol or, an addiction, whether it's, to alcohol or drugs or pornography, or even if it's a food addiction, a spending addiction, a shopping addiction. It is not God's plan for you to be a slave to anything, to be weighed down by anything, burdened by anything. It is God's plan for you to live a free and abundant, holy, righteous life for him. And so if you find yourself in a place that I was in, where you're broken, where you're down, where you're not living the life God has for you, where you're not along the path that you had for him, I want to remind you guys that he still loves you, and he wants to pull you out of that. And so all it takes is just saying, Jesus, pull me out of this. I don't want to go down this path anymore. I want to go down the path that you have for me. I want you to be my Lord and Savior. I want you to be my life. I believe that you died for me. I believe that God raised you from the dead, and I want you to be the Lord and the Savior of my life for the rest of my life. And you cry out to him, he will help you, and he will turn you around, and he will allow you to do that 180 just like he did for me. And so I want to remind you guys that it's not something that was just available to me or to other people. It's available to you as well. And so I know that got deep, but that is the truth with that. And so friends, if you're in a dark place, God wants to pull you out of it. I also want to, point out too that, and this is going to kind of lead into, the next part of the story and the healing part of, my story. But my mom, she was so good about being real with me, being honest with me. And she saw right through my lies. And she would always be like, Carter, no. And she loved me too much to allow me to slip and fall and to stay in the path that I was on. And she just painted such a beautiful picture of what Jesus does for us every single day, that he loves us too much to allow us to stay stuck anywhere. That he loves us too much to allow us to, have less than he has for us. And so he will lovingly discipline us and correct us, but he loves us too much to let us stay anywhere that is not from him. And I also just want to remember or remind you guys that, God writes the most beautiful stories. when I look back on the journey of coming here and just that whole process and that whole season, and how, in my, kitchen, I said, what if I, went to Ole Miss and, became an education major or whatever, that was God writing the story. Like, he put that on my heart. Like, I, randomly said that without any context really, and that's because he writes the most beautiful stories. And so I just want to remind you guys that, God is a beautiful author. He is writing your story, and he writes them so beautifully. And so he will take the bad and he will use it for good, and he will bring beauty out of ashes, and he allows us to do 180s. So that's like kind of the first part of the story. So once I decided to come to Ole Miss, it was crazy, because it was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to be going here now. So I got in and really excited about it. And so a little bit of time had passed from the time, like, I decided I wanted to go to getting in, and I was still, in this relationship. Then I decided just to call it off because we were just headed in two totally different directions. My leaders, once told me this thing where, when you meet somebody that you're interested in, see where they're running in life, where they're headed and what they're doing. Then as time goes on, look back again and see where they're running. And okay, are they ahead of you? Are they right with you? Or are they behind you? And you don't want to be with somebody who is behind you, who is pulling you down. And at that point in my life, I just feel like, this person I was with was behind me, and I was running in a different direction. And so I had to cut it off and go separate ways so that I could grow and so I could flourish. So I broke up with him, and then that led to pain. It was difficult. It was hard. It was painful because it was a breakup. And even though I knew that I didn't need to be with this guy and he wasn't good for me, I had built, life and time with him. And another thing too that I just want to speak on is that because, the relationship was filled with sexual sin, there were soul ties, and that is a legit thing. And so I really want to speak into that like, sex is not just sex. And I know that, like, so many people, think that in our generation, sex, no strings attached, but the reality is, like, sex binds you to somebody else. It is created for marriage, so husbands and wives can become one. It is not meant, to be taken outside of that. It is meant to be worship for God within the confinements of marriage. But when we take it out of that, then it's not worship and it's sin. And it hurts our hearts, and it separates them from God, and it connects them with somebody that we shouldn't be connected with. And so, if you're, thinking about falling into sexual sin, or if you are, already deciding to walk in purity, keep living it out and make the decision to walk in purity. But if you're like me and you did fall short and you made that mistake, I want to remind you guys that there is forgiveness and there is grace and there is healing. And that's where I want to lead into, like, this next part of my story. So I was dealing with a lot of pain and a lot of brokenness, and I was excited to go to Ole Miss, and I still had, I had 8 months to go, maybe 6 months, something like that. And I just was broken and painful and healing, and life was still really good though. I was doing fun things, and life was good, but there was also this pain and this hole in my heart. And I always went back to Psalms 51, and it says, "Have mercy on me, O God, because of your unfailing love, because of your great compassion. Blot out the stain of my sins. Wash me clean from my guilt. Purify me from my sin, for I recognize my rebellion and haunts me day and night. Against you and you alone have I sinned. I have done what is evil in your sight. You will be proved right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. For I was born a sinner, yes, from the moment my mother conceived me. But you desire honesty from the womb, teaching me wisdom even there. Purify me from my sins, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I'll be whiter than snow. Oh, give me back my joy again. You have broken me. Now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. Do not banish me from your presence, and don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and make me willing to obey you. Then I will teach your ways to rebels, and they will return towards you. Forgive me for shedding blood, O God who saves. Then I will joyfully sing of your forgiveness. Unseal my lips, O Lord, that my mouth may praise you. You do not desire a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You do not want a burnt offering. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O God. Look with favor on Zion and help her. Rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Then you'll be pleased with sacrifices offered in the right spirit, with burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. Then bulls will again be sacrificed on your altar. And so that was just my, the verses that I read, and I just cried out to God about that. I wanted my joy to return, and I wanted to be made right in his sight again. And I wanted to be forgiven of, the sins that I had fallen into. And then I wanted to prepare my heart for this next season of my life and this next journey. And so the whole, season of the breakup, that could be a whole podcast, um, a whole journey through that. But there were a lot of key moments where God touched me and God healed me. And a couple of those, involved being at church and, just the placing of hands and words being prophesied and people, speaking in tongues over me and just like God just healing me. And that's exactly what he did. He healed me and he restored my joy to me. And he allowed me to rise up from the brokenness. And so if you're going through a breakup or somebody going through a breakup, I just want to remind you that you can't do it without God. We all have a God-sized hole in us. We have this hole in our hearts, and it is only filled by God. And so I just want to tell you, if you're going through a breakup or if you know somebody going through a breakup, a rebound is not going to heal you. A hookup is not going to heal you. Partying is not going to heal you. Posting a fire picture of you on social media is not going to heal you. Buying new things, numbing the pain, falling into sin, whatever it is not going to heal you. Only God can heal you, friends. And he wants to heal you, and he desires to heal you, and he loves your heart, and he doesn't want to see it broken. And so if you are broken and hurting, even if it's not a breakup, if it's anything else in life that is leaving you feeling broken and depleted and empty and lonely and down, I just want to tell you that your heart is longing for God to fill it, and only he can fill it. Nobody else can. And he wants to heal you completely and fully. And so allow him to. Let him in. Bring him in and allow him to heal you. And it can look like crying out, just like, I gave the example of the prayer of saying, God, like, I need you. In my life, you can pray, God, I need you to heal me. My heart is broken. It is hurting. I am in desperate need of healing. I want you. I want to experience closeness with you, deepness with you, intimacy with you. And I want to be restored and to be full and to be beauty. God, give me beauty for ashes so that I can go and be a testimony to others, so that my brokenness and the healing and the restoration you gave me can be, the light and can be testimony and truth, and I can be your witness to other people. And that is a beautiful thing, is that, a breakup and tragic things are tough and they are hard, but God can take them and use them to be a beautiful story that can encourage other people. And now, I'm on the other side, months on the other side since, the breakup and healing and everything. And now, I'm getting to help other people who are going through that and talking to them and sharing with them the things that I learned. And I want to just remind you that, like, God wants to heal you. He can heal you. He will heal you. And then he will take it all and use it for good and allow you to go be encouragement to other people, which is beautiful. But one of the verses that I just loved, that always stuck out to me, was 12 and 13, which says, restore to me the joy of your salvation and make me willing to obey you. Then I will teach your ways to rebels and they will return towards you. And that one just always stuck out to me because Ole Miss, we're the rebels, Ole Miss rebels. And obviously it's talking about rebels, hearts that are turned away from God. But I knew with coming to college, there was going to be a lot of people who had their hearts turned away from God because, well, it's a big secular university, known for partying and sin and a lot of different things like that. And I knew there was going to be, actual Ole Miss rebels, but they were going to have, rebel hearts. And I wanted God to restore his goodness and his truth and his salvation and his wisdom to me so that I could then go and share it with the rebels. So that just started to become my prayer, that he would do that he would heal me, that he would restore me, and that I would get prepared for this next season of my life. And so I just started to meet with, my leaders back home, my mentors, my friends, and just having deep conversations with them and talking to them and, just asking them for advice and seeking healing. And I learned so much from them, and I gained so much wisdom from them. And one of, the biggest testimonies was my mentor, told me, Carter, really pray for your future friends. And if you guys have listened to the Friendship Podcast, you know that God delivered, 120%, he delivered. And I just prayed for friends. I prayed for friends who were actively walking in their faith, that they weren't, secular, culture Christians with one foot in, with God and one foot in with this world, that they weren't just, a Bible verse, in their bio or a cross around their neck, but that, God's word was in their heart, that they were actively seeking to live for him, and that the fruits of their spirit, were reflecting that they were walking in purity, that they weren't, caught up in wild living and drunkenness and, partying and things like that, but they were, actively living and walking out God's truth and his goodness, and he delivered that. I pray for friends that I could have fun with, that I could go on adventures with, hang out with, and enjoy life with. He delivered on that. I pray for friends who were confident and friends that encouraged me to look more like him, and they just reflected who he was so good and so well, and he delivered on that. And so I hope that that can just be an encouragement to you guys, that prayer is powerful, that prayer works. And if there is something that you want, and believing that like it aligns with God's will in your life, if it's healing for a family member, if it's a job for a family member, if it's healing for you, if it's, salvation for a friend, whatever it is, if it's friends, pray for it and believe for it by the blood of Jesus, by his truth, by his goodness. He can deliver. And if he doesn't deliver the way that you thought he should or you wanted to, then it's because he has something better in store, because his ways and his thoughts are higher and greater than ours, and they're not like ours. And so prayer is powerful, prayer works, God delivers. And now I'm here and I'm getting to share, with Rebels, his goodness and his truth and his righteousness. And then another verse that, he really met with me, because so once I decided to go to Ole Miss, the only time I'd ever seen it was when I toured it. And I wasn't going to be coming back here again until I moved in here to my dorm that I'm in now. And so there was a lot of like fear with that or whatever, but I had a, Bible verse, and God gave it to me when I decided to go to Ole Miss. I don't even know how I came across it, but it was such a God moment how I found it. I think, I remember I was doing a Bible study on my phone, and it was just something like random. And I was reading it, and this verse came up, and it was right around the time, I want to say it was the day I got into Ole Miss, like when I saw I got in. And that was so surreal. I want to share that because it's such a, story of joy and goodness. I was on my phone so maybe it was that day. I'm like processing with you guys right now, but I was on my phone and I was like doing a Bible study or whatever. And I got a message, and it said, "Hottie Toddy Carter." And I was like, what? And well, that's what my shirt says, Hottie Toddy. And I was like, wait, what? And I clicked on it, and it said like acceptance. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I go to my email, and I like refresh it, and I check it. And it said, "Carter, you have been admitted to Ole Miss." And I just remember like I dropped my phone and I jumped up and down. And I just remember I got down on my knees and I just thanked Jesus, and I just started crying. Because I was so excited, because I knew that this was where I was supposed to go. This was the next step that I was supposed to take. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, like what if I don't get in? But God provided, and he made a way, and it was joyful and it was exciting. And I'm going to connect that in with something else in a minute. But the Bible verse is Hebrews 11:8, and it says, "It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going." And that, like, God gave that to me. So I decided to go to Miss in like August of 22. And then I didn't come to Ole Miss until January of 23. So lots of months in between. And by the time, got to Ole Miss, and my parents had helped me move in and everything, I was driving them to the airport because they were flying back home. And I remember once I dropped them off and I was driving back here, I had this thought going through my mind, like, what am I doing? Like, oh my gosh, I'm excited, and this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. But I don't know anybody. At the time, I had not met a single soul. Like, I had met people, obviously out and about, but I didn't have any friends. I didn't know this area, totally coming in by myself. I, live in this dorm, room by myself. There's other people in the dorm, obviously, but, no dorm mate, no friends, no nothing. And it was that Bible verse, I just clung to it. I was like, God, I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know what's going to happen. You called me to go here. I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust you. And this is scary, but I know that this is where I'm supposed to be. And then I dropped my parents off on, I think it was a Friday or Saturday. And then that Monday, first day in class, I met Sophie and Sarah Beth. And God has been faithful for the rest of it all. And I just want that to be an encouragement of you guys to take steps of faith. Sometimes we don't know what the road ahead is going to look like. Sometimes we won't know the next step or the next one after that or the next one after that. But if God is calling you to do something, he will provide. He's Yahweh. He provides for his people. He makes a way for his people. He never, ever leaves us empty-handed. And if we don't have something, then it means we don't need it. But we have everything we need to fulfill what he has for us. And so if he's calling you to do something, if he's calling you to apply to that college, then apply. If he's calling you to go and be friends with that person, go and be friends with them. If he's calling you to, go and sit with that person that no one sits with at lunch, go and sit with them. If he's calling you to ask out that girl, then ask out that girl. If he's calling you to, seek forgiveness, to apologize for a mistake that you made, then seek that forgiveness and, apologize. If he's calling you to pray for somebody, if he's calling you to read a book, if he's calling you to just get back into the gym, simple things like that, listen, go where God is calling. And I'm telling you guys, and I hope my story is a testimony to you guys that he will provide and he will make way, because here I am. That was 4-5 months ago, something like that. I'm really bad with these months, like almost 5 months ago, 4 months ago. And it was scary and it was difficult. And now I'm literally in my last 2 weeks here and I don't want to go back home because I love it here so much. Obviously, I'm excited to go back home, still love home, but I love it here so much. And so I want that to be a testimony to you guys that God will provide and he will make a way. But also want to remind you guys that sometimes the road and the journey there isn't always going to be easy, and yes, there is beauty and beauty will come. But, my story didn't start out as beauty right away. It was painful. And there were lots of times where I came home and I cried. And I went to bed and I cried and I was broken and I was upset because, my whole life was turning around and it was changing. And even once I decided to come here and I was driving here, it was so heartbreaking to leave my parents. It was so heartbreaking to leave, my grandma and my dog and my sister and all those things. And it was hard to come to a place I had never been before, 13 hours away from home and not know a soul. It was tough. And even the first 2 weeks here for me were tough. I had days where I cried and I was upset. And I'm going to show you guys this picture of me if you guys are watching the visual, because I want to remind you that sometimes where God calls us to go, it's not always going to be perfect, but he is. And he's enough for you and he will provide for you and he will give you everything that you need. So just take that step of faith. Step out. Be bold. Be courageous. Go where he's calling you to go. But look, here was a picture of me if you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. I was really upset. I was crying. I don't know if you can see it. No, I don't think so. This lighting is awful. It makes me look weird in the picture. Okay, but anyways, that's me right there. I was crying and I was upset, but God delivered and he provided. Now here I am and I'm rejoicing and I'm getting to tell about his faithfulness and his goodness and his testimony that he gave me. So go where he's calling, go where, he's sending you to go. And step out in faith and he will provide. He will make a way. He is Yahweh. And lastly, I just want to share about, one of the things that my leaders prayed over me. And he prayed that every single day God would give me a sign that this is where I'm supposed to be, if this is where God has for me. And God, has done that without fail. And it's little things. But the first night we got to Ole Miss, we ate at this pizza place. And I was a little afraid coming to a big secular college, and especially since, my faith had been a little rocky that past, year. And I was just a little afraid of just, okay, do I have it in me? Do I have what it takes to not fall into the sin? But God quickly helped me to realize that it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with him and my strength to say no to temptation and to walk in his truth and his goodness comes from him alone. But we went to this little pizza shop and it was a Christian shop, and on the wall it was the Bible verse, under his wings you will find refuge. And that was just enough for me to be like, hey God, I have refuge here. I'm safe with you here. This may be scary, it may be difficult, but I am safe with you here. And the next day, we were looking around the square and I ran into, we were at this cute store with the cutest shoes ever. Loved it. And we got talking to the girl and they had worship music playing in the store. And I just made a comment. I was like, I love this song. And we got talking about faith, and she actually was an education major. And I haven't seen her, on campus since then. But it was such a sweet reminder that, there are believers here too. And there's people that are actively walking in their faith. And God is right in this place too. And even though, because I think a lot of people get scared and Christians can get scared to go to big secular college. And if that's, the place that you're in, I just want to remind you guys that God is here too. God is everywhere. And he's in your heart and he's wherever you go. And so if he's calling you to go to a big secular college, then go. And don't be afraid of being like the other kids who party and go crazy, because if you have God and if you have a godly community around you, then you're going to be just fine. And so it's just been little things like that, little sweet, testimonies of his goodness. And I know, like, no doubt that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I'm excited to be here for the next 2 years after this semester. And I've met so many wonderful, amazing people. I've had so many awesome, amazing experiences. I got to join the equestrian club and got to travel for that and be around the horses, which is so fun. I got to meet my amazing best friends and some other, really good friends that I hang out with, go get dinner with, ice cream with, coffee with. I've been able to, stay in a good workout flow here, and I've been able to enjoy nature here, like just the little things. Like, God is delighted in all of it. And so my heart behind this is just that you guys can see that, like, God is good and that he is faithful when we're faithless, and that he has a great plan and purpose for us. And if you're in a dark place, he wants to do a 180 in your life. And if he's calling you to take a step of faith, then take it. Prayer works and it's powerful, friends. And he writes the most beautiful, beautiful stories ever. And another beautiful thing just about his goodness about being here is that I have grown so much being here. I've grown in maturity and I've learned a lot. And I definitely want to make a podcast about everything that I've learned since coming here. But that's my testimony. It was scary at first, but God provided. He showed up. He made a way. And now I'm on the other side and able to, share that he healed me, that he wrote a beautiful story, and that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so I hope that I just showed you guys how good God is, how much he loves you, how he has a great plan for you guys. And if you have any questions about it, or if you want to talk about faith and stepping out and being bold, my DMs are always open on the podcast account or even my personal account. And I would love to answer any questions and talk about, being brave and being bold for Jesus. I want to emphasize, so I'm not perfect in this, and I do make mistakes, and there's times where I don't step out when I should, and I'm not always bold and brave when I should, but because of God's love, grace, goodness, and faithfulness for me and towards me, he allows me to look more and more like him each and every single day, and he is doing that for you guys as well if you let him in. So I hope that was some encouragement to you guys, and I just wanted to remind you guys about the goodness and love of Jesus Christ. But I hope you guys have a great day. And for my Be the Light challenge is I want you guys to pray a dangerous prayer of faith and ask God to show you something that you need to do that might be a little scary. Because when you do that and you step it out and you live it out, your life gets to be a testimony to others. And if God's already showed you something, then I encourage you to go do it. So Be the Light challenge is to pray or to do the thing that God is calling you to do. Big step of bold faith that advances his kingdom and shows his goodness and allows him to work through you. But that's all for this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And stay tuned for more.